You know that specific kind of silence that happens right after a bomb goes off? Not a literal bomb, but a social one. The kind of silence where the air gets sucked out of the room so fast that everyone's ears pop? That is exactly the atmosphere I was basking in last Sunday night. I sat at the head of my mahogany dining table, a table I had bought with my own hard-earned money 30 years ago, and I took a slow, deliberate sip of my iced tea. The ice cubes clinked against the glass. Clink, clink, clink. And in that deafening silence, it sounded like a gavel striking a judge's bench. Across from me, my son Mark looked like he had just swallowed a whole lemon, rind and all. His wife, Jessica, who usually never stopped talking about her influencer lifestyle and her aesthetic, was frozen with her fork halfway to her mouth, a piece of roast potato trembling on the tines. My grandson Tyler had actually looked up from his phone for the first time in a decade, his mouth hanging open. Why were they staring at me like I had just grown a second head? Well, because 30 seconds ago I had casually reached over to the Bluetooth speaker sitting on the sideboard, the one they thought was just playing smooth jazz, and I had hit a different button. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I didn't cry. I just pressed play. And out of that speaker came their voices. Crystal clear. High definition. She's losing it, Mark. Honestly, it's getting pathetic. Yesterday she forgot where she put her glasses again. We need to move up the timeline. That was Jessica's voice, shrill and annoyed. Then Mark's voice, deep and dismissive, filled the dining room. I know, babe. I'm working on it. I spoke to the lawyer. If we can prove she's incompetent, we get power of attorney by next month. Then we can sell this drafty old house and use the money to fund your boutique. She won't even know what hit her. She'll be safer in a facility anyway. God, imagine the peace and quiet. Jessica's recorded voice laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. No more nodding along to her boring stories about the 80s. Just make sure she signs the papers before she totally snaps. I let the recording play for another 10 seconds, just enough for them to hear themselves laughing at my expense, before I reached over and paused it. The silence that followed was, as I said, delicious. It was heavy, thick, and suffocating. I set my glass down gently. So, I said, my voice steady and calm, offering them a warm smile that didn't reach my eyes. Who wants more gravy? I watched the blood drain from Jessica's face. It was fascinating, really, seeing someone go from a spray-tan bronze to a ghostly pale in under a minute. Mark started to stammer, pushing his chair back, the legs scraping horribly against the floor. Mom, wait. That's not what it sounds like, he choked out, looking around as if a hidden camera crew was going to jump out and save him. Oh, it sounds exactly like you planning to commit me and steal my assets, Mark, I said, picking up my knife and fork to cut a piece of chicken. But please do go on. Explain to me what move up the timeline means in a context that doesn't involve you betraying the woman who paid for your college degree. This is the part where I tell you that revenge is a dish best served not just cold but with audio evidence. They thought I was a confused 60-year-old woman named Laura who couldn't remember what day of the week it was. They thought my senior moments were a sign of decline. They had absolutely no idea that every time I forgot my phone in a room it was recording. Every time I spaced out, I was memorizing their schedule. They assumed I was forgetful and helpless. But I was just playing the long game. Before I tell you exactly how I set this trap and what happened next, because believe me, the dinner was just the finale of a very long, very calculated opera, I want to know who else is here for the drama. So, pause the video for a quick second. Scroll down to the comments and tell me exactly what time it is where you are and what city you're watching from. Are you watching this at 2 a.m. in London? Lunch break in New York? I want to see where my squad is at. Drop that comment and let's get back to the mess. Hey, you done? Good. Back to the table. You might be wondering how it got to this point. How does a mother end up recording her own son and daughter-in-law? You don't wake up one day and decide to go full James Bond on your family unless something is seriously wrong. I love my son. Or, I loved the version of him that existed before he met Jessica and before he decided that money was more important than loyalty. The look on Mark's face wasn't just fear. It was confusion. Genuine confusion. He had spent the last 6 months convincing himself that I was senile. He had sold himself that lie so effectively that seeing me sharp, articulate, and holding all the cards broke his brain. He looked at me like I was a stranger. How? Jessica whispered, finally dropping her fork. It clattered onto the china, leaving a streak of gravy. How did you get that? I may be 60, Jessica, I said, leaning forward. But I'm not dead. And I certainly know how to use the voice memo app on an iPhone. Did you really think I wouldn't notice you whispering in the kitchen every time I went to the bathroom? Did you think I was deaf? We were worried about you. Mark tried to pivot, sweating profusely now. Mom, you have been forgetful. You left the stove on last week. You forgot our anniversary. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Oh honey, I didn't forget your anniversary. I just didn't feel like celebrating the day you married a shark. The tension was ratcheting up. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, not from fear but from adrenaline. This was the moment I had been rehearsing in the shower for weeks. But to understand the sheer satisfaction of this moment, you have to understand the months of gaslighting, the patronizing tones, and the absolute cruelty I had to endure to get the evidence I needed. I had to play the victim so well that I almost started believing it myself. To really understand why I nuked my relationship with my son at the dinner table, we have to rewind about 6 months. This didn't start with microphones and lawyers. It started with something much more insidious: fake concern. You see, Mark and Jessica had moved into my house, temporarily, after Mark made some bad investments in crypto. I didn't mind at first. I'm a widow, the house is big, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial that my late husband and I poured our souls into, and I thought it would be nice to have family around. I envisioned Sunday roasts, movie nights, and bonding with my grandson Tyler. Boy, was I delusional. Within weeks, the dynamic shifted. It started with small comments. I'd be looking for my reading glasses, which, let's be honest, everyone over the age of 20 does occasionally, and Jessica would exchange this look with Mark. A look that said, "Here we go again. Do you need help finding them, Laura?" she would ask, using that high-pitched, slow voice people usually reserve for toddlers or golden retrievers. Did you look on your head? I'm 60, not 90. I run my own Etsy shop selling hand-knitted blankets. I do the Sunday crossword in pen. My mind is sharp as a tack. But living with them felt like being under a microscope where every normal human error was catalogued as a symptom of decline. The turning point, the moment I decided to stop fighting the narrative and start leaning into it, happened on a Tuesday afternoon in July. I was in the kitchen making tea. Mark and Jessica were in the living room, thinking the hum of the kettle masked their conversation. It didn't. "She left the milk on the counter again," Jessica complained. "It's been sitting there for 10 minutes, Mark. What if she drinks it and gets sick? Then we have to deal with the hospital." "I know, babe," Mark sighed. "She's slipping. I don't think she can handle this place alone much longer." I looked at the milk carton. I had taken it out literally 2 minutes ago to pour into my tea once the water boiled. I wasn't slipping. I was making tea. But instead of marching in there and correcting them, something stopped me. A cold realization washed over me. They weren't worried about my health. They were annoyed by my existence. And worse, they were building a case. If I defended myself, they would just call me defensive or agitated, classic symptoms of dementia, according to the internet articles I knew Jessica was reading. If I got angry, I was unstable. There was no winning if I played it straight. So, right then and there, standing in my kitchen with the kettle whistling, I made a choice. If they wanted a doddering, forgetful old lady, I would give them an Oscar-worthy performance. I decided to test the waters. That evening, I walked into the living room wearing one blue sock and one red sock. I knew exactly what I was doing. I had dug through the laundry specifically to find the mismatch. "Hey guys," I said, blinking vaguely. "Have you seen the remote? I wanted to watch that show. Oh, what's it called? The one with the wheel." "Wheel of Fortune?" Jessica asked, smirking at Mark. She pointed to my feet. "Lar, look at your socks. Did you get dressed in the dark?" I looked down and feigned gasp. "Oh my goodness. Would you look at that? I could have sworn I put on the white ones. Must be the lighting in my room." I watched them carefully. A loving son would have laughed it off or gently teased me. Mark didn't laugh. He looked at Jessica and nodded, a grim satisfaction on his face. It wasn't sadness in his eyes. It was calculation. They weren't seeing a mother losing her way. They were seeing an opportunity opening up. From that day on, I ramped it up. I became the master of forgetting. I'd ask Jessica the same question 3 times in an hour. "What time is dinner, dear? Is it chicken tonight? When are we eating?" I watched her patience fray like a cheap rope. "I just told you, Laura," she snapped the 3rd time before catching herself and reverting to that sickly sweet nurse voice. It's chicken, sweetie. Remember? We talked about it. Oh, right, I'd mutter, shuffling away. Silly me. But while I was shuffling away, I was listening. I realized that the more helpless I appeared, the more they ignored me. I became invisible. They stopped whispering when I entered the room because they assumed I wouldn't remember what they said anyway. I was no longer the matriarch of the house. I was a piece of furniture that needed dusting occasionally. This invisibility was my superpower. They started leaving documents out on the counter. Bank statements, credit card bills with astronomical balances I certainly hadn't racked up. They made phone calls on speaker right in front of me. One afternoon, Mark was on the phone with a realtor in the hallway while I was napping in the armchair 10 feet away. Yeah, it's a prime lot, he was saying. 4 bedrooms, huge yard. We're thinking of listing it in the fall. The owner? Yeah, my mom. Well, she's not in a position to manage it anymore. We're getting the paperwork sorted. My heart hammered against my ribs. Listing it in the fall. That was 3 months away. That was the timeline. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were actively planning to displace me while I was still breathing. I kept my eyes closed, regulating my breathing to sound like sleep, while a fire ignited in my belly. That mahogany table I mentioned earlier? The one I sat at during the grand reveal? I bought that table to host family dinners to create memories. Now my son was calculating how much it would fetch at an estate sale. I knew then that simple eavesdropping wasn't enough. My word against theirs wouldn't hold up in court, or even in the court of public opinion with the rest of the extended family. Mark was charming. Jessica was manipulative. They could easily spin this as, Laura is paranoid and confused. I needed concrete proof. I needed their voices, their plans, and their cruelty captured in high fidelity. I needed to bug my own house. You'd be amazed at what you can buy online these days with next-day delivery. I didn't go to some shady spy shop in an alleyway. I just went to Amazon. I bought a set of voice-activated digital recorders. They were tiny, smaller than a pack of gum, and they had a battery life that lasted days. While I waited for my gadgets to arrive, the atmosphere in the house shifted from patronizing to actively hostile. It's called gaslighting, and let me tell you, it is a psychological weapon. They stopped waiting for me to make mistakes and started manufacturing them. One morning, I woke up and went to take my blood pressure medication. I keep my pill organizer on the kitchen counter, right next to the coffee maker. It's been there for 5 years. But that morning it was gone. I searched the drawers. I searched the pantry. I started to feel a genuine prickle of panic. Did I misplace it? Then I remembered the game we were playing. I took a deep breath and walked into the living room where Jessica was scrolling on her iPad. Jessica, have you seen my pill box? I asked, keeping my voice tremulous. She didn't even look up. It's in the bathroom cabinet, Laura. Why would it be in the kitchen? I always keep it in the kitchen, I stammered. No, you moved it yesterday, she said, finally looking at me with a pitying smile that made my skin crawl. You said you wanted it near your toothbrush so you wouldn't forget. Don't you remember? I stared at her. I had said no such thing. I knew for a fact I hadn't moved it. She had moved it. She was actively messing with my environment to make me doubt my own reality. It was cruel. It was dangerous. If I had actually been suffering from memory loss, that kind of manipulation could have sent me into a spiral. Right? I said softly, lowering my head. I must have forgotten. It's okay, she said, turning back to her screen. It happens. When the recorders arrived, I waited until they went out for their weekly date night, which I was paying for, by the way, since Mark had borrowed my credit card for gas and never returned it. As soon as their car pulled out of the driveway, I went to work. I felt like a criminal in my own home. I taped one recorder under the dining room table. I hid another one behind the books on the shelf in the living room. I slipped one into the pocket of Mark's golf bag, which sat in the hallway and he never actually used for golf anymore. And for good measure, I put one on top of the kitchen cabinets, pushed back where it couldn't be seen but could pick up audio perfectly. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait. The next few days were a test of endurance. I had to maintain the confused old lady act while knowing that every insult they threw at me was being archived. Did you see her outfit today? Jessica said one afternoon while they were in the kitchen. I was in the garden, but the window was open and the recorder on the cabinet was rolling. She looks like a scarecrow. It's embarrassing to have friends over. She's just eccentric, Mark mumbled. He sounded tired. Look, did the lawyer call back? Yes, Jessica's voice sharpened. He said we need a doctor's evaluation to declare her incompetent. We need to get her to Dr. Evans. He's easy to sway. If we tell him she's leaving the stove on and getting lost, he'll sign off. My blood ran cold. Dr. Evans was an old family friend, but he was retiring soon and frankly a bit checked out. If Mark and Jessica went in there with a united front and a list of incidents they were fabricating, he might actually believe them. I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It was about freedom. They were plotting to take away my autonomy. They wanted to lock me up in a facility so they could live in my house, spend my savings, and pretend they were the victims of a tragic family situation. The anger I felt wasn't the hot, explosive kind anymore. It was cold. It was calculating. It was steel. I decided to give them more ammo. I started leaving the TV on at high volume in the middle of the night. I lost my keys and made Mark drive me to the store, only to find them in my purse when we got there. I wanted them to feel confident. I wanted them to think victory was so close they could taste it. Callbacks to their gaslighting became my inner fuel. Every time Jessica moved my stuff, like hiding my favorite knitting needles or switching the salt and sugar jars, I smiled internally. Go ahead, honey, I thought. Move the salt. You're just digging your own grave. One evening, I retrieved the recorder from the living room while they were sleeping. I plugged it into my laptop with headphones on. The file was long, mostly silence and TV noise, but then I found it. The smoking gun. It was late at night. They were drinking wine. I could hear the glasses clinking. How much do you think the house will go for? Jessica asked. Conservatively, $800,000, Mark said. Maybe more if we renovate the kitchen. Once she's in the home, we can take out a loan against the equity to fix it up, then flip it. And the nursing home fees? Medicare will cover the basics, Mark said dismissively. We don't need to put her in the Ritz. Just somewhere safe. The cheapest one in the county is fine. She won't know the difference anyway. I paused the recording. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. The cheapest one in the county. My son, who I had raised, supported, and loved, was planning to dump me in a warehouse for the elderly so he could renovate a kitchen. That was the moment the last shred of guilt left me. I wasn't a mother protecting her child anymore. I was a woman protecting her life. I spent the next 2 days compiling the greatest hits of their conversations. I learned how to edit audio files on my computer. YouTube tutorials are a godsend, by the way. I spliced together the insults, the legal plotting, the admissions of moving my things, and the plan to sell the house. I created a master track. A symphony of betrayal. And I knew exactly when I was going to debut it. Sunday dinner. The one time a week we all sat down together, including my grandson Tyler, who they had been poisoning against me, telling him grandma was sick and crazy. I wanted Tyler to hear the truth. I wanted him to know who his parents really were. The preparation was meticulous. I cooked a roast, Mark's favorite. I set the table with the good china. I made sure the Bluetooth speaker was fully charged and paired to my phone, which was hidden under my napkin. I was ready. The stage was set. The actors were in place. All that was left was to raise the curtain. We've caught up to the present. The dinner table. The silence. The gravy drying on the plate. The recording had stopped playing, but the echo of Mark saying she won't know the difference anyway seemed to bounce off the walls. Tyler, my 17-year-old grandson, was the first to break the paralysis. He slowly turned his head toward his father. You were going to put Grandma in the state home? Tyler's voice cracked. The one on 4th Street? Dad, that place is a dump. It's been on the news for neglect. Mark flinched as if he'd been slapped. Tyler, no, you don't understand. It was just, we were looking at options. It's complicated. It didn't sound complicated, Tyler said, pushing his plate away. It sounded like you wanted to sell her house and keep the money. Tyler, go to your room, Jessica snapped, her voice regaining some of its sharpness. She turned her glare on me. You shouldn't be involving him in this, Laura. This is adult business. You're twisting things. Twisting things? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Jessica, I played your own voices. I didn't edit the words into your mouth. I just removed the pauses. I picked up my phone and tapped the screen. Shall I play the part about the nursing home conspiracy again? Or maybe the part where you admitted to moving my pillbox to make me think I was losing my mind? Jessica's mouth snapped shut. Mark stood up, his face red. Hey Mom. Sup? Just stop. You're clearly not well. This paranoia recording us? This proves you need help. A sane person doesn't bug their own family. A sane person doesn't have to. I shot back, my voice finally rising. A mother doesn't have to protect herself from her own son unless he gives her a reason to. You think I wanted to do this? You think I enjoyed hearing you call me a burden? A scarecrow? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I slammed it onto the table next to the roast chicken. You mentioned Dr. Evans earlier, I said, watching Mark's eyes widen. Well, I went to see him yesterday. On my own. I took a full cognitive assessment. A mental status exam. Everything. I unfolded the paper and spun it around so they could read it. Read it, Mark. He looked down. Patient is fully oriented to time, place, and person. Cognitive functions are excellent for her age. No signs of dementia or cognitive decline. I'm not senile, Mark, I said, leaning in close. I'm just disappointed. The realization washed over them. Their entire plan, the legal guardianship, the forced sale, the control, hinged on proving I was incompetent. With a clean bill of health from the very doctor they planned to use, their case was dead in the water. They had nothing. You played us, Jessica whispered, shaking her head. You sat here pretending to be a confused old lady, and you were laughing at us the whole time. I wasn't laughing, I said coldly. I was grieving. I was grieving the relationship I thought we had. But now I'm just cleaning house. What does that mean? Mark asked, his voice trembling. It means the temporary living arrangement is over, I said. I want you out. Tonight. Mom, you can't be serious, Mark pleaded, switching tactics to the pathetic son routine. We have nowhere to go. We have no money. You know that. I know you have enough for wine and boutique clothes, I countered. And I know you were planning to flip my house for 800 grand. Surely someone with that kind of business acumen can figure out a rental apartment. We have rights. Jessica shrieked, standing up now. We've lived here for 6 months. You have to give us 30 days notice. You can't just kick us out. I smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had done her homework. Actually, Jessica, since you never signed a lease and never paid a dime of rent, you are guests. Guests who have overstayed their welcome. But if you want to get technical about the law, let's talk about elder abuse. I tapped the phone again. Psychological manipulation. Gaslighting. Conspiracy to defraud. I have hours of audio evidence. If you want to drag this out and demand 30 days, I will take this recording to the police station tomorrow morning and file a report for attempted fraud and elder abuse. I'm sure the local papers would love that story. Local couple tries to commit sane mother to steal inheritance. The color drained from Jessica's face again. She knew I had them. The social shame alone would ruin her influencer aspirations forever. Mark looked at me, tears actually forming in his eyes now. Mom, please. We're family. Family doesn't try to put their mother in the cheapest nursing home in the county, Mark, I said, my voice cracking slightly. The hurt was still there deep down. Family doesn't treat a grandmother like an obstacle to be removed. You broke this family. Not me. I looked at Tyler. Tyler, you are welcome to stay. There is always a room for you here. I would love for you to stay. But your parents need to pack. Tyler looked at his parents, then back at me. He stood up, walked around the table and stood next to my chair. He didn't say a word, but the action spoke volumes. He was choosing a side. I'll go pack a bag, Mark said quietly, defeated. He looked like a deflated balloon. All the arrogance, the plotting, the confidence, it was gone. You have 1 hour, I said. After that, I'm changing the locks. As they shuffled out of the dining room, bickering in hushed tones, I sat back in my chair. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving me exhausted but incredibly light. The weight of their presence, the constant second-guessing, the fear of losing my home, it was all lifting. I looked at the Bluetooth speaker. Best $20 I ever spent. Tyler reached over and took a bread roll. So, he said, trying to lighten the mood, though his eyes were sad. Does this mean we don't have to listen to Mom's jazz playlist anymore? I let out a genuine laugh. Honey, we can listen to whatever we want. But the night wasn't quite over. There was one final twist waiting in the wings, one last loose end I had to tie up before I could truly claim my victory. Because while Mark and Jessica were the villains, They hadn't acted alone. Someone had been feeding them information about my finances. And I had a pretty good idea who it was. The sound of suitcases bumping down the stairs is a very specific kind of music. It's a heavy, clumsy rhythm. Thud, drag, thud. That sounded like victory to my ears. Mark and Jessica had spent the last hour throwing their designer clothes into bags, probably arguing in whispers about whose fault this was. I sat at the kitchen island slicing a fresh apple pie I had baked earlier that day. Because if you're going to evict your ungrateful children, you should definitely have dessert ready for the survivors. Tyler was sitting across from me looking a little shell-shocked. He was scrolling through his phone, probably blocking his parents on every social media platform known to man. "You okay?" I asked, sliding a warm slice of pie toward him. A scoop of vanilla ice cream melted slowly down the side. "Yeah," he said, letting out a long breath. I can't believe they actually thought they could get away with it. Like, did they think you wouldn't notice being put in a home?" "Greed makes people stupid, Tyler," I said, taking a bite of my own pie. "It blinds them to the obvious. They saw an old woman and assumed weak. They forgot that I've been navigating this world 30 years longer than they have." Just then Mark appeared in the doorway. He looked haggard. His eyes were red and he was holding a box of his essentials, mostly video games and cologne. Jessica was behind him, refusing to make eye contact, clutching her oversized handbag like a shield. "We're leaving," Mark said, his voice thick with resentment. "I hope you're happy, Mom. You've successfully made your own son homeless." "I didn't make you homeless, Mark," I said calmly. "I made you independent. There's a difference. You're 40 years old. It's time to launch." He lingered in the doorway, a final venomous thought clearly forming in his mind. He couldn't just leave with his tail between his legs. He had to try and hurt me one last time. "You know," he sneered, "you can change the locks but you can't change the facts. We saw the bank statements, Mom. We know about the account at First National. We know you have the liquidity to help us and you're choosing not to. That makes you heartless." I stopped chewing. There was the loose end. "Ah," I said, wiping my mouth with a napkin. "The First National account. I was wondering when you'd bring that up. You see, that's what I couldn't figure out. I keep my statements locked in a safe in the basement. A safe you don't have the combination to. So how did you know the exact balance?" Mark hesitated, realizing he'd said too much. "It doesn't matter." "It does matter," I corrected him. "Because that information didn't come from a piece of paper. It came from a person. It came from my friend Linda, didn't it?" Mark's face went pale. Linda was my neighbor of 20 years. We drank coffee together. I trusted her. But I had noticed Mark chatting with her over the fence a lot lately. Flirting, charming her, playing the concerned son. "She didn't mean to," Mark stammered, trying to throw her under the bus to save himself. I asked her if she was worried about your spending. She mentioned you had plenty put away." "Linda has a big mouth," I said, shaking my head. "But here's the funny part, Mark. And this is the real truth bomb I've been saving for dessert." I stood up and walked over to them, leaning against the doorframe. "I knew Linda was talking to you. I saw you two whispering by the rosebushes 3 weeks ago. So I decided to run a little test. I told Linda I had just deposited a large inheritance from a distant aunt into that First National account. I told her it was nearly $500,000. Mark's eyes lit up even now at the mention of the number. "But it was a lie, Mark." I smiled, and it was the sweetest smile I had given all night. "I don't have a First National account. I closed it 5 years ago. The account you and Jessica have been salivating over? The one you built your entire renovation budget around? It doesn't exist. It's a phantom. You've been plotting to steal a pot of gold that was never there." The silence that followed was heavier than the one at dinner. Jessica made a sound that was halfway between a gasp and a sob. They hadn't just lost the house, they had been chasing a ghost. "But the house," Jessica whispered. "The house is worth money." "True," I nodded. "But since you were so concerned about my competence, I decided to simplify my estate planning. Last week, while you thought I was napping, I signed the house over to a trust." I turned and pointed at Tyler, who was mid-bite of pie. "The Tyler J. Miller Irrevocable Trust," I announced. "I retain the right to live here until I pass, but the ownership? It's already his. Even if you did manage to declare me incompetent, you couldn't touch the asset. It bypassed you completely." Tyler choked on his pie. Wait, what? Surprise, I winked at him. Mark looked at his son, the son he had ignored for months, and realized that the boy was now legally the owner of the roof over his head. The power dynamic had shifted so violently that I thought Mark might actually faint. You gave it to him? Mark shouted. He's 17. And he has more integrity in his pinky finger than you have in your entire body, I said, my voice dropping to a steel whisper. Now, get out. There was nothing left to say. The money was fake. The house was gone. Their reputation was in tatters. They turned and walked out the front door into the cool night air. I watched them load the car, the red taillights fading down the street like dying embers. I closed the heavy oak door and locked it. Then I slid the deadbolt. Thunk. I walked back to the kitchen. The house felt different. It didn't feel empty, it felt cleansed. The toxicity was gone, scrubbed away by the truth. So, Tyler said, looking at me with wide eyes. Do I really own the house? On paper, I said, sitting back down. But if you don't finish high school, I'm turning it into a cat sanctuary. Don't test me. He laughed, and for the first time in months it was a real happy sound. We sat there for a long time just eating pie and enjoying the peace. They thought I was losing my memory. They thought I was fading away. But the truth is, I remember everything. I remember who treated me with kindness, and I remember who treated me like a burden. And most importantly, I remembered that I am the author of my own life, not a footnote in theirs. So, to anyone watching this who feels invisible or who feels like people are underestimating them because of their age or their quiet nature, let them. Let them think you're helpless. Let them think you're not paying attention. Because the moment they drop their guard is the moment you press play. And that, my friends, is how you serve revenge. Sweet, cold, and with a side of apple pie. Alright, that is the end of the story. If you enjoyed watching me take out the trash and reclaim my life, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button until it breaks. And if you want more stories about justice being served cold, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Also, I want to know, would you have forgiven Mark, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. See you in the next video.